Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. It's early on Saturday morning. I'm going to try and get this filmed and processed and posted before I go to the Orchid Society meeting. Now, this is part of a series that will go on for as long as I think it's necessary or people are willing to watch the videos, basically. The concept is the good, the bad, and the ordinary. So I pick on a genus that I've got multiple plants in, and I pick out my best one, my worst one, and one that's somewhere in the middle, is just sort of okay, so that we can do a reasonable comparison. Part of the idea really is people who are thinking of trying out a new genus, which I've done in the past, you try something new, is to have a look at what you possibly could be aiming at and what to avoid. Now, these are Masdevallias. Now, if you are in a warm place or a warm country, these are not going to do that well, with a few exceptions. There are some warmer growing, I wouldn't say warm, but certainly up in intermediate growing Masdevallias. There are also hybrids that are heat tolerant, which is a strange expression. It means they'll put up with a temperature higher than they would like for relatively short periods of time, but not for 3 or 4 months through the whole summer. They'll just stall. So in the main, these are cooler growers. They like reasonable light, not intense light. I wouldn't get any sun on them, especially through glass, but some of them like reasonable light or they just won't bloom. And others like it to be quite shady and they object to bright light. So, it's either a bit of trial and error or a bit of research needs to be done. There are a lot of species. They come in all sorts of colours, from pure white literally through to the deepest purples, through all the pinks, through all the creams, into the yellows, into the oranges, into the bright reds, into the deep reds. So yes, and combinations of patterning, spots, stripes, various. So it's a genus that has a distinct look. Most of the blooms, they are referred to as the kite orchids because a lot of the blooms do have that triangular sort of look where they've got 3 points heading off at equal distant angles from the center. Some of them are quite tunnel-like, trumpet-like, and you literally got to get head on to see inside to see the colors and things, but they are low feeders. They do not like salts in the pot or any form of build up. They like a clean media that's relatively fresh. The media can be adjusted. They don't all necessarily like, you can grow them in pure sphagnum moss. Many people do. Not compressed or compacted, light and fluffy sort of thing. Some grow them in bark. Some grow them in bark mixed with other things like perlite. It varies. But the thing to watch out for is the type of roots. Some of the Masdevallias have quite thick fleshy roots. They tend to prefer a more airy mix. So they might tend towards bark with not much else in it perhaps. And then there are those that have very, very fine roots, almost hair-like. They're going to want a much more compact media because their roots need to touch things, so they don't want lots of air spaces. So you have to vary your media. There's no sort of one suits all. And sometimes it's just trial and error. You have a plant for a while, it don't seem to be doing very well, you don't understand why. Try changing the media. It can often work. So whereas you've perhaps tried it in moss, maybe because that's what it was in when you got it, and it just doesn't seem to progress very well, well, try it in small bark, perhaps with some perlite, and some moss, but not too much. Just try varying the media. It can often work. Right, so these three then. The good is at this end. This is my best Masdevallia. It's growing incredibly well. It's chucking out new growths everywhere. But it's yet to bloom for me. So I've yet to get any blooms on this nice looking Masdevallia. This is falcata. The fact that I've done the label with a capital F implies it's a hybrid, despite having a name that's quite species-like. This is a typical Masdevallia. It's a medium-sized one. It's got an excellent root system, actively growing at the moment. Much better roots than when I first got it, so it's growing roots very well. Providing they don't die back, then it's reasonably happy with the media, which is soaking wet at the moment because these were watered later yesterday. So yeah, that's a nice plant, and it's a typical looking Masdevallia. The leaves can be quite thick and fleshy. They're not fragile, not looking. They often look as though they've got thin wispy leaves, but they're often quite thick and chunky and fleshy. So that's that one. That one's doing fine. I have no worries. However, like I said, it has yet to bloom. And I might have a chat with a couple of people at the meeting today that may have this one to see if there's a trick to get it to bloom. Is this one of the higher light orchids and I'm just not giving it enough light? Yeah? Whatever. Now, the bad, these two are round the wrong way, is this one. And this one doesn't want to grow. It has got a new growth. It's pushed up one there that's a bit distorted. It's pushed up another one there that hasn't opened properly. It's got dead roots. It hasn't got any live active roots at the moment. This does not want to grow. And if you look at the plant, most of the plant is dead. It's got a little bit of life over this side and a little bit of life over this side. This whole plant here, there's nothing ever going to grow out of this section. It's dead. So it's like the centre of the plant has died and the only areas of growth that are possibly going to do okay around the outside. Now, that is a species. It's Nisenia. I presume that's how you say it. And it's not doing well. So I'm going to change the media on this because I think it's just staying too wet. But whatever's happening, the volume of media for the amount of actively growing plant is far too great. So although that looks like a tiny little pot, it's still too big. So this needs to go in something smaller. Now, I could make this pot a lot smaller by crocking the bottom half of it. It would then be half the depth, which means it's got half the moisture, which means it's only got half the water in it, so it should dry twice as fast. That may be a solution. But this one just won't get going. Now, from others that grow Masdevallias, these can stall, where they will sit and do nothing for quite a long period of time. And it is incredibly easy to lose your root system during that time because you keep chucking water in there. The media is staying wet, it's getting the base of the plant wet, which sets in some rot. The water's not getting used. So plants that are just not growing and stalled like that need the minimum amount of moisture. That's a soggy pot, so we'll have to deal with that one. I think that's the only Masdevallia I've got that I'm going to have to do something with relatively urgently, or I will lose it. Then the ordinary, this is just a standard type of hybrid. Lovely blooms. When I repotted it, it split into two. The smaller portion threw out a bloom almost immediately and then promptly died afterwards. So this is what's left. It's not a huge plant, and it can be. So it's not growing as well as it should. However, we do have active roots in the pot. And we have an amount of active roots. It's not a full root system, but it's growing. a root system, so it's progressing. It's produced some new growths. Yeah, the colour on Masdevallias makes it reasonably obvious, the new growths, even if all the leaves are the same size. The new green is quite a bit lighter than the older green, which can be quite deep green. So what are we up to then? We have a new growth down there to go with some of the others. We have a couple of new growths over here with smaller leaves than they should be. This leaf here is up to size. So it's growing, but it's not doing that well. This went downhill when it bloomed. So if this one tries to bloom on any of these new growths now, I'll stop it. I'll take the spike off, because the plant obviously needs time to get better established before it can spare the energy to throw those blooms up, because the blooms on this are quite large. So they do take some of the energy out of the plant. So yes, a bit about Masdevallias. As I said, generally speaking, they are cool growers. They don't like heat, but there are some that don't mind it, and there are some that go up into the intermediate range heading towards warm, but they are the exception to the rule. So if you've got a hybrid, you can take a pretty good guess that it's going to be a cool grower and it's not going to like intense light. That's a generalization, but it should do you okay in the main. Yeah, but as I said, there's always exceptions. So that's another one. This is group 2. I'm giving them a name so that we can come back to them. Yeah, you know, so if we come back in 6 months' time and look at group 2, this may not be the best one anymore. It might have gone downhill. This might have perked up, and it'll certainly have had a repot. This one may have progressed. It might have stalled. So that's the idea. By doing a set of 3, it's not too many to look at, which means we don't have an hour-long video or anything like that. And by giving it a name, we can return to it at a point in the future and revisit a small group of plants in the same genus. So that's the idea. Right, Sunday chat tomorrow, and we will be starting with the saga of the tyres. Yes, I have 4 new shiny tyres on the car. Let's put it this way. I didn't get home until 5:45, and I left here just after 3. There's a story there. See you tomorrow for the Sunday chat. Bye for now.